Hi, and welcome to lunchtime, basically on Friday, pretty much the only time I had any time to give any sort of an update. There's one case primarily I want to provide an update for, and I really haven't posted really any videos that I can recall on this case, and it's such an important case. But meanwhile, there's a few other things I want to get to as well. If you have any questions, you let me know. Hopefully, I'll see comments as they come across. Let's see. Just first things first, it's important to follow the guidelines that we have right now. So I just want to make sure that everybody follows the guidelines.
Again, I encourage all businesses that are allowed to open to do so only if they can follow the guidelines to keep West Virginia safe.
Again, so just important advice from the governor of West Virginia, and that's certainly probably one of his more coherent moments. But first things first, probably speaking of the governor, the most important thing that I want to remind people of is that my client and friend and patriot, Delegate Marshall Wilson, is running for governor in West Virginia. And again, he was a Republican who, based on what he was seeing happening in the state, switched to be an independent. And he is running now as an independent. And it takes 7,200 signatures to get on the ballot. So both parties have made it very difficult for somebody running for governor to get on the ballot. Lawrence, hey, Mountain Man Outdoors, thanks for watching. And let's see. And again, you can check out the website that I put all my blog posts on, thecivilrightslawyer.com. You can contact me by email, and that's the best way. Sometimes I see random messages elsewhere, but I have a bunch of email addresses, but they all pretty much go to the same place. That's my main office email. So email is always the best way to get a hold of me if you have something important to let me know. Always remember, keep calm and call John. Hang on, I got to turn on a couple other little things here. Where are we? There we go. All right, so you basically, these signatures for Delegate Wilson have to be in physically in person by Monday, I believe. If anyone else is in my proximity and I'm in my main bunker right now at my main office in Union, Monroe County, I also have an office in Lewisburg in Greenbrier County, but I'm most of the time now, since the apocalypse started, I've been at my Union bunker. As you can see, I've got plenty of defensive weapons. I've got knives, personal protection, pistols. I've got swords, pretty much anything I could possibly need. Here in the bunker, I've got writing implements. They love this one when I take this into court, by the way. So anyways, if you can get me your signatures, I'm planning on seeing in person Delegate Wilson, hopefully on Sunday, so I can deliver those to him. And hopefully my wife is out helping to get signatures as well. And here locally at one of the best gun shops in the state, Union Outfitters, they have a sign-up sheet there. And I know a lot of people go there from all over the place on Saturdays. So if you're looking for ammo, that's usually a sure thing. One of the places that you can find it is Union Outfitters, but you can also sign that petition for Marshall Wilson. And remember, it's not your vote. And it's confusing to understand what is and is not a vote these days, because it seems like everybody's pushing for a mail-in vote. And here it's harder to get Marshall Wilson on the ballot than it is to vote in some states, and how easy it would be to vote as a Democrat if President Obama had his way. So it's more difficult to get on the ballot for governor than it is to vote, or at least to get a petition signature. But they need to get those signatures. They need 7,200, and they don't know how many they have because there are people collecting them all over the state. So it's better to overdo it and have too many than to fall short. Secondly, next Wednesday on the radio on West Virginia Metro News to discuss moving forward in our challenges against the governor's tyrannical executive orders. And again, speaking of Marshall Wilson running for governor, he is the primary plaintiff behind that case. He's the one who came to me initially and said that he wanted to file a lawsuit against the governor. He wanted to challenge, what could be done. And that's how the process started. So he has put his life and his money where his mouth is, and done everything he can to defend not only the federal Constitution and his 21 years in the military as a combat veteran, but also as a state legislator, taking on the governor personally, trying to defend the state Constitution. So if you can't tell, I really want to see Marshall Wilson on the ballot for governor. This has been a very eye-opening time about the pure power of a governor, not just in West Virginia, but anywhere. And it wasn't necessarily designed that way, but that's how it's turned out to be, is that these governors have become all powerful. And just look at our governor appointing a czar. And where is he? Yeah, there. This is our COVID-19 czar. And if you look at a post I did on my blog a few days ago, I showed how, who is our czar? And he's basically the head of the medical school and all the hospitals, from what I understand, at WVU. And this is the same WVU that is highly politicized in their political donations as far as, all their employees there. It's almost all to liberal Democrats. And remember, this is the same WVU that when our West Virginia Citizens Defense League was fighting for campus carry, who was opposing that? It was all these professors and the leadership at WVU talking about how dangerous it would be to allow students, college students on campus to be able to carry weapons that they're otherwise lawfully allowed to carry off of campus, on campus, to defend themselves. And no, they wanted only the police, for instance, only the WVU Police Department to be able to defend them on campus. But what did we learn about the WVU Police Department? Well, it was just a few days ago or a few weeks ago, week and a half ago, whenever it was, that the chief of police at the WVU Police Department apologized publicly for having a thin blue line flag, essentially a pro-police flag, inside his own private home. So speaking of that, and I talked about that in my last video, and I've been critical of the whole concept of a thin blue line before, but I'm sure if I was a police officer, I'd probably have some sort of pro-police flag. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea and these days to keep it inside your house and not outside your house. But that's exactly what this guy did. I mean, that's just pure retaliation against somebody's First Amendment rights. And, as I said, that would be a great lawsuit. That's what I do. I mean, First Amendment retaliation, any sort of retaliation against free speech. I mean, that is you can file a 1983 action on behalf of that. But anyways, I saw today that yesterday there were several state legislators that sent a letter to WVU. Here it is right here. basically, calling this apology out as, out of line with their values and their belief system, and what they think their constituents represent. Because the people of West Virginia, the voters, they don't see eye to eye with necessarily the leadership at WVU. And that's the whole point here, is that WVU, I would argue, is running our state right now, because they have their entire, their head medical guy as our czar, who is clearly influencing, if not outright controlling, the governor of our state in the complete absence of the legislator. I saw this online the other day, and I thought this was great. This is what I'd really like to see if I tuned in to one of the governor's little press conferences. And again, I watched one the other day. I just can't bring myself to do it. I figure if he says something funny or outrageous or whatever, I'll hear about it secondhand. I saw this the other day. This is what I want to see. Today, Governor Justice admits that he has no authority over the citizens of West by God. I don't think we'll see that anytime soon, but hey, it's what I'd like to see anyways. But I saw this. This is pretty funny as well. And again, you got to remember to follow the guidelines. So I'll be on the radio this coming Wednesday at around 9:38, 9:40, I believe, on with Dave Allen to discuss how we're going to move forward with the legal challenge against the West Virginia governor. And as I've discussed before, everybody knows that the Supreme Court did deny our petition for writ of mandamus. Even after that, the Attorney General came out and said that, well, it just had to be denied because the governor cannot be compelled to call the legislature into session. They have the ability to do that themselves. So he may call them, but he doesn't have to. And I've explained already several times why that is a flawed argument. But here the proof is going to be in the pudding, because here's what we can do now, and we're going to discuss on Sunday, and maybe we'll be announcing on Wednesday. We'll see what we're going to do, but we can refile it. We can file it again, seeking injunctive relief this time. We can seek a preliminary injunction, a temporary restraining order. And, it might not just be legislators that are plaintiffs this go around. There's been many, many businesses who have been absolutely devastated. And when I say businesses, who are we really talking about? Even in all the national debate about trickle down economics and people who make over or under $250,000 a year. Well, a lot of times we're talking about small businesses. And that's majority of what we have in West Virginia. We have small businesses, and a lot of times when I've represented people, sometimes they don't even have an LLC or a corporation, which you don't have to have. They're just operating under their own name. Hell, that's pretty much how I do it. Because lawyers cannot be protected by a corporation or an LLC, or as they call it with lawyers, a PLLC. You still by the ethics rules by law have to be liable for whatever you do individually anyways. So, my belief always has been, well, why pay the extra, fees and et cetera for no reason really? I guess you have contractual defenses, but there's not a whole lot of that in law practice. But so a lot of the people who run businesses in West Virginia and elsewhere in rural America, they are small businesses themselves, and that's how they're taxed. And a lot of these people have been completely devastated and shut down. And I've been contacted by more people than calls I can return. And as Tom Roten asked me, you'd think that more people would want to file lawsuits and challenge the governor here. Well, like I told him, the problem is not a lack of demand for legal action against the governor. The problem is, how are they going to do it? They've technically, you could file things yourself. And there are actually prison lawyers, jailhouse lawyers that are pretty good at filing things. They sit there all day, some of them, and file pro se lawsuits or draft pro se lawsuits on, for other prisoners, all sorts of things. But generally, you have to have a lawyer to do these things. I mean, or especially when it comes to suing the government. I mean, most lawyers don't know how to do that successfully because it's a highly specialized area, because there are all sorts of traps. There are immunities. There's constitutional immunity. There's qualified immunity. There's absolute immunity. There's all sorts of immunities, and you got to know how to get around those immunities. There are procedural traps. Like, do you have to give 30 days pre-suit notice when you file a lawsuit against the state? Do you still have to give 30 days pre-suit notice if you sue a city or a county? Is that the same thing? No, it's not. But there's all sorts of issues and legal technicalities when it comes to suing the government. So there's a very limited number of lawyers that know how to do that to begin with. And then out of those lawyers, there's a very limited number of them who would be willing to do that. So one thing about me that I've always, if I want to sue somebody, if I want to take on a case, I'll do it. I'm not going to be constrained by fear of what might happen, or fear of retaliation, or fear of reprisal, or fear of being unpopular. If somebody needs suing, then I don't care. I'll sue him. I don't care if he's the governor. Hell, one time I sued the governor before. I sued the governor on a couple times probably, but I sued him once long before he was the governor on behalf of a mom and pop transmission shop. They had rebuilt the transmission in an old work truck and got stiffed on the bill and had to hire a lawyer and sue them. Well, what does it cost to rebuild a transmission? I think maybe it was like $1,500. Well, by the time you get done paying a lawyer, maybe you've spent $1,500 or more these days, probably. So I've never been afraid of doing that. But anyways, people, they're in line to join any sort of a lawsuit to challenge the governor. And so we may be including certain well-situated private citizens or businesses to enter the next challenge. So there's going to be very little wiggle room for anybody to get out of kicking the case on procedural grounds or anything other than the merits of the case. So what we need to get to is the constitutional crisis that occurred in the case. What are the limits of the governor's powers? And another interesting thing is I was listening to Tom Roten this morning, and he had Senator Manchin on. And if you haven't seen my video on Senator Manchin and the Second Amendment, you've got to see it. I don't have it on here to play, but I should have. But anyways, we disagree on a lot. But Senator Manchin, it sounds like he agreed with us as far as the lawsuit goes, that the legislature should have been called into session, that they should be in session, and that they're not doing their job if they're not in session. I mean, if this is really the event of our lifetimes, which our governor called it, if this is a turning point in American history, if it's a state of emergency, which it's been a declared state of emergency for at least 4.5 months now. Well, what the hell is your job as an elected representative of the people? Why don't you just resign? So you just want to show up every January 30th or February 1st and just hang out with a bunch of lobbyists and other legislators for 3 months and go home and you're not a legislator anymore. So the people don't have any representation during the 10 months in between. And that's how it's turned out. But why don't you resign and let somebody else do it if you're not going to step up? There's been there's only a minority of states whose legislature has not met to discuss what to do in response to COVID-19. We are one of the, a minority of states who have been run completely by our governor. And again, I've gone over that many different times, but we're gonna probably hopefully have news, when I'm on the radio there on this coming Wednesday. Another brief thing that I wanted to point out: if you go to my blog website, thecivilrightslawyer.com, I have a case I just posted on there, and there's another lawyer that I get updates stuff, because I'm really interested in the new law developing around hemp, and she sent me this case that she had been following out of Maryland, and I didn't really go through it all that much yet, but I posted it so that you could read it. It's in the post that I did for the video today, and it's from the Maryland Supreme Court. It's basically holding that the police cannot use the smell of marijuana to search and or arrest a person. So why is this important? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but how many people are sitting in prison right now because they got pulled over and a police officer said that they smell marijuana? Can you step out of the car? And then one thing leads to the other, and we know how that goes. And that's probably a lot of people that are in prison right now. And it's very similar with gun rights, and because especially in Maryland, police officers will ask you, do you have any weapons in the car? And that's a BS question, first of all. So you either lie or you basically incriminate yourself, and then they ask you to get out of the car, and they can do a Terry search then for their own safety, and then they end up arresting so many criminals in that process, but they also end up harassing a lot of law-abiding citizens who have committed no crime, because of course it's not illegal for them. Well, maybe in Maryland it is, but just let's say West Virginia. We're talking West Virginia. It's not illegal to have a gun on you. It's not illegal to have a gun in your car. Now, under certain circumstances, you might be a prohibited person, and it might be illegal. But officers cannot just assume that it's illegal. So that's why we fought this Michael Walker case all the way to the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, where it is now, because for the same reason, police officers in West Virginia cannot go target somebody who is open carrying a firearm and just assume, well, he might be a convicted felon, and stop that person, get their ID, run a background check on them, or harass them. That is in violation of existing case law under the Fourth Circuit. So that's the same sort of issue that we're fighting right now in the Walker case, and our brief is due in the Walker case here in a few weeks. And we just got some news that the Gun Owners of America may be filing an amicus brief in support of our case, and they're awfully busy right now, with everything that's going on. So they may not be able to, but they definitely want to, and I'm confident and hopeful that they do. So that's what's going on with the Walker case, and that's the video. If you haven't seen the video, look through the YouTube videos on this channel, on my channel, and you'll see, where Michael Walker's walking down the side of the road with a AR-15 style rifle slung over his shoulder in a safe manner with a backpack over it. And he subsequently is harassed and called a cocksucker, excuse my language, several times. And that was before really the whole country got mad at police officers. So it's hard to believe, in light of the way things are now, that there was no discipline or anything in response to that. But people certainly were mad. You can just look at the views and the comments on that YouTube video. So that's what's going on with the Walker case. Again, check out that Maryland case on the smell of marijuana. That's going to be important going forward, because I don't think the Fourth Circuit which governs the federal law we're in West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina. It's going to be very important to see what the Fourth Circuit does on that issue, and it's going to be coming up more and more. So just be aware that case is out there. Again, it's on thecivilrightslawyer.com. The other case I really wanted to do an update for was the James Dean case, and this is James Dean right here. This is a really sad case. This happened over in Canova in the Huntington area. James Dean was basically got arrested. He lived with his elderly mother. He ended up getting arrested, and he was in handcuffs, and they put him in the police car. They got him out of the police car, and something went wrong, and he had contact with the ground while his hands were handcuffed behind him. And he was taken to the hospital. And the next thing you know, he has a brain bleed. They have to perform a craniotomy, and he's in a coma. So when I got the call from the family, and this is back in April of last year, April of 2019, I went and visited James in the hospital, and I'll show you a picture right here. I had to surreptitiously take this picture. I was in that hospital room with Joe Severino, who was a reporter with the Charleston Gazette, and I wanted to document that this had happened, and nobody seemed to care. The nurses and the doctors wouldn't let me take a picture of his injuries. So he was basically brain dead. He was on a ventilator, and the machine was breathing for him. It was very sad, and that's his mother, kind of softly calling his name, James, and she's being asked to make the decision to pull the plug on him by the doctor. She's being pressured. They're saying, we can't keep him here any longer. We're going to have to transfer him to some expensive facility. He doesn't have any chance of recovering. You're going to have to agree to pull the plug. So that's the very sad situation when she was facing that decision. And they wouldn't let me take any pictures or anything to document what was going on. And the police wouldn't show up. The FBI wouldn't show up. Nobody seemed to care that this man was dying. But not only was he dying, but he was brought there in police custody. And the doctors had said that his injury was trauma to the skull. So here, that's basically a homicide from my understanding. So there's a man about to die. Evidence needs to be preserved. The police won't show up. The state police won't show up. The local police won't show up. The FBI won't show up. Nobody seems interested. Nobody seems to care. All I could get there was a newspaper reporter. And shortly after that, they finally talked the mother into pulling the plug. So, and here's where it just really gets even worse is that, again, that was April of 2019. So they don't issue a death certificate. So here's basically what they gave us to begin with. It was kind of a preliminary death certificate so that he could have, so some of the arrangements could be made. But as far as the cause of death, they put pending cause/manner. And that was bizarre to me because, the brain surgeons seemed to know exactly what the cause of death was. In fact, if you look lower on that document, you'll see that it says that, the injury occurred in the police station receiving area. So the police brought this guy in custody for an injury that happened in custody. And then all of a sudden, when his brain starts to bleed, he goes into a coma. Well, they got the hell out of there. All of a sudden, where was the police? They didn't even call the mother to tell her. She found out that her son was brain dead in a coma the next day, where the doctor found out her number and said, "Hi, I just performed a craniotomy on your son." And she said, that can't be. He said, oh no, James Dean, this is him, right? And so that's how she found out. The police department, the Canova Police Department that arrested him, didn't even contact the mother. And this happened the night before. And here, she didn't find out till maybe 3:00 in the afternoon, I believe, the next day from the doctor. So, he was in their custody, and then, as soon as the brain starts bleeding, he goes into a coma. They got out of there. So it just blew my mind that nobody would come. Nobody would come document the injury. So I looked at the medical records, and this is what the nurses and the doctors recorded. He came in. See, I was able to confirm it. He came in custody with the Canova PD, and it says patient was taken to the ground by police. Taken to the ground by police. Abrasion on the back of the head, and ETOH. That means that he was intoxicated. So I don't see how they could deny that this was something that happened possibly as a use of force during his arrest or during his processing. But no one seemed to want to investigate it whatsoever. You just had me, and I lived like 3.5 hours away. So, and one reporter. So, anyways, the news is we've been waiting all this time. That was April of 2019. And here we are in end of July, almost August of 2020. And now we finally got the death certificate. So here is the death certificate we just received this week. And look at this. All right, date of death, April 22nd, 2019. Now look at the next one. Cause of death, released on July 13th, 2020. That is over a year. Over a year. You want to talk about government incompetence. All right, cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Now, why did it take that long? Well, my theory has been that they were looking for any way to help the police. They were hoping they could find evidence that he had meth in his system, something like that, something that could just, miraculously cause him to all of a sudden die of some reason other than a fracture to his skull. But the medical records, as I showed you, it was like 2,500 pages of medical records from the brain surgeons that showed that there was trauma to the head that caused the brain bleed, that put him in a coma, that ultimately caused his death. I mean, it was pretty simple, but the wizards at the medical examiner's office just couldn't seem to figure it out why this guy died. And they've always covered up for the police in my experience, but they, I don't know what kind of hoops they jump through to try to find some sort of cause of death related to alcohol or drugs or anything other than, trauma to his head. So finally, it looks like we'll be able to proceed with that case. Again, there's 2,500 pages of medical records, and it's going to be a complicated case. But you know what? And talk about police problems with police. I mean, that's not actually the first case I've had of somebody who's been handcuffed in police custody and had their head contact the ground while they're handcuffed and basically helpless. I had another case. Here he is right here. This was the Messer case out of Logan County. You can see he was in a coma as well, and he fortunately came out of the coma and survived to help me litigate his case. And he came to my office here in Union, and when we settled the case. So this is not something that is a racist conspiracy. This is something that's been happening for a long time. And, that's what kind of pisses me off about, WVU, who's running our state right now, is all of a sudden, they're on board with social justice. They're calling for social justice. Again, this is off their website. So, they argue that WVU is embedded in and benefits from systematic racism and historical trauma and disparate economic incomes for Black and brown people. Well, there's mostly white people in West Virginia, and there's been problems here for decades. And when was WVU worried about police misconduct or issues with police prior to George Floyd? And it just goes to show that they're just virtue signaling. Moving on. So, I don't want to say exactly what we're doing in that case, but there'll be some news in it soon. The eviction wave that's coming. I did a post on this yesterday, I believe it was, that today was the last day of the $600 a week on federal unemployment benefits. So that I'm not sure if Congress has moved on that or not. I've been busy, but experts were predicting that there was going to be something like 20 million evictions in August. And usually that's how many evictions in the country occur over a year. And all those are expected to happen in 1 month. And West Virginia is expected to be sort of ground zero for that. And, so there's going to be a huge wave of evictions coming in West Virginia. And the Supreme Court had put kind of a moratorium on evictions for a while, but that was up in like May. And as I've mentioned before, I don't see how that can even be legal. But that's where we are is the government is picking and choosing, winners and losers, because if you're going to stop an eviction, then you're hurting a landlord potentially. Now, it may not matter to some landlords. They may be a big company or a bank. It may also just be a family that depends on that income. So, there's probably been a lot of people who either haven't been able to or just have chosen not to pay rent during a lot of this shutdown time. And there's going to be a lot of litigation that's coming out of that. And there's going to be a lot in West Virginia. So if you haven't read the post I did on it, I put some of the links and graphics up there. I think it was from a Forbes article. And let's see. So basically, I think that the next thing that's going to happen is we're just going to have to figure out what's the best way to tactically challenge these executive orders, because we can't allow this to happen again. Even if you're in the camp of the people who think that Jim Justice has done a good job, protecting you and protecting West Virginians, you have to look at the bigger picture that you're always dealing with a slippery slope with personal individual constitutional rights. So the problem is not the inconvenience of wearing a mask. The problem is being the government forcing you to wear a mask, not because you just don't want to wear a mask, but because if they can do that, what else can they do? They can take away your Second Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights, because as the governor said, who cares about overreaction? If we can save just one life, it's worth it. And you know what? That's absolutely false, because liberty is not about security, and it's not. Our rights do not begin. Our rights as individual citizens, they do not begin where Karens fear. No, I had that backwards. Our rights do not end where Karen's fear begins. Another phrase that I like to use to explain this point is freedom is scary. It just is. If we cannot allow ourselves to allow restrictions for things that scare people. So the open carry of firearms or the concealed carry of firearms. Of course, it's going to scare certain people, but that shouldn't affect our rights. So, it's the same thing with the mask law, is that if the governor can do that, especially without the legislature, what else can he do? And I would argue that he can do anything. It's always a slippery slope. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned in history here. You can look at what happened. It's kind of cliche, but you look at what happened in Nazi Germany, and it all began with fear. It was the burning of the Reichstag, so the burning of what is essentially their Capitol Hill building. Well, it's a terrorist act, and we're going to have to institute basically martial law to keep the country safe. And that it was just one thing after the other. Once you allow one of those things, once you allow one overreach, you've already agreed to the second, to the third, and the fourth overreach. And so once you allow it one time, you can't object then. So once you agree to allow the governor to make you wear a mask, then you've agreed to all sorts of things that you probably haven't even thought about yet. So, you just need to remember to follow the guidelines. And another thing that I thought was pretty good is, well, not good. It's actually really bad. Is here again? We're afraid. We're scared over what's been just slightly over 100 deaths, mostly of elderly people. And now, of course, any death is awful, but we don't have any evidence that anything that Jim Justice has done would have saved, or could have done, would have saved any one of those individuals. But we do know that West Virginia is one of the worst states that there is as far as heart disease deaths. So probably, there's been 3,000 now, or at least 2,500 heart disease deaths in West Virginia, and how many more this year that we haven't even counted yet, because people have been cooped up in their houses and they've been kept away from people. They haven't been able to go to funerals of family members. They haven't had to be able to go to weddings or see their children or see their grandchildren. How many more heart attacks has there been? Because people didn't even want to go get routine medical treatment, either because it wasn't allowed under the governor's order, or because they didn't want to catch coronavirus by going to their doctor for regular appointments. And they've been sitting at home eating, frozen dinners. So how many more deaths are there going to be from other causes, from suicides, from just unintended consequences? Now, the governor may have been well-meaning, but, we should have at least had a debate on whether to do this. And who debates on our behalf? That's our legislature, our elected representatives. Again, here's another good one. So put a mask on, you're putting my health at risk. And of course, that there is, many of our founding fathers signing the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So, and there's Jim Justice with his McDonald's. Couple other good ones that there he's telling me as Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator to put my mask on. So that's pretty much it. Just remember to follow the guidelines.
Again, I encourage all businesses that are allowed to open to do so only if they can follow the guidelines to keep West Virginia safe.
So remember, follow the guidelines, and I'll see you next time. Again, don't forget Wednesday at around 9:40, I believe, on West Virginia Metro News with Dave Allen. Hopefully, we'll have some big news on what the next step is going to be and the challenge to the governor's executive orders. And I'll also invite Senator Manchin, despite our ideological differences, if he wants to be a plaintiff in that next case, I'd love to have him as a plaintiff if he wants to challenge the governor's orders. And he really should. And I know a lot of people have connections with him and know him. So please get Manchin involved in our next case. Sorry, I haven't really been able to review the comments, but I appreciate you guys commenting and following along. And from until I talk to you next time, just remember to, well, first of all, check out civilrightslawyer.com. A lot of the stuff that I referenced is up there, and also follow the guidelines as you were told. And I will see you next time. So now it's time for me to get back to work, and I'm here in the bunker already. So take care.